Would you like to start your own podcast? Or do you already have a podcast but wish you could focus more on recording great content and spend less time on all of the technical aspects? Fear the Beard Media wants to help you start a brand new podcast or maintain your existing feed absolutely free. When you join the Fear the Beard Media Podcast Network, we'll produce, post, and promote your podcast free of charge. That leaves more time for you to focus on what really matters: creating awesome audio content. If you're interested in joining the Fear the Beard Media Podcast Network, email us at fearthebeardmedia@gmail.com.
Football, the All-American game, is in fact a Canadian invention. The year was 1874, and the McGill University football team first implemented the modified rules of English rugby in a game with Harvard. The potent offense of today's game was not yet evident, and the game ended 0-0. In 1891, the Canadian Rugby Union was formed, followed by the birth of the Big Four, comprising teams from Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Our modern-day game certainly has no monopoly on competitiveness.
Welcome to the Daily Fantasy CFL Podcast. Crazy Gaby here, your host, hanging out with John Buffalo Hold'em Sullivan. And we, as promised, are back again. And we won't leave you guys. We hope, at least if it doesn't happen. And I think this may be the sexiest podcast we've ever done, just by virtue of it being about 1 a.m. in the morning when we record.
Yeah, well, you know, late night CFL is what I'm all about. Actually, this is gonna sound really bad, but if you remember last week, I said I might be watching in my jammies, and and I actually fell asleep at the 10 o'clock game last Saturday night, so I had to watch it on replay. So not too sexy usually at 1 o'clock in the morning, but here we are.
So could we almost say if this was a show on Showtime, we could call it like the Red Leaf Diaries? Get it? Yeah, I think everyone who was a young man back in the early 1990s probably gets that reference. But anyways, I'll leave the rest of it to the imagination and say that Week 8 was not great, and I'm rhyming. So that's
well,
that.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible. On the DFS side of things, my lineup was horrible. I made a couple of assumptions in my previews last week about how I thought a couple of games were going to go, and they didn't turn out that way at all. So my lineup suffered. My wagers went 1-1, and thanks to some missed kicks that kept me from going 2-0. But the wagers are 8-5-1 on the year. We're still profitable, and I'm hoping to improve on that going forward. So not to keep the people in suspense, but why don't we start the reviews, and I will mention which games did not happen as I expected.
Well, I'm suspended right now. I don't know about the people there, but I can't wait to hear this, so we can absolutely get into it. The Alouettes versus the Eskimos, 23-12. Eskimos prevailed. Tell me why the Inuit were so strong in this one.
Well, I don't think the outcome of the game was ever really in doubt. It was 11-6 at halftime, so it was close. But just from the outset, Edmonton seemed to have control of the tempo. They seemed to have control of the field position. Montreal was just awful offensively. And this game, last week I said, the Eskimos has been giving up a lot of yardage this year, giving up a lot of points. I said this might be the week to play a couple of guys from Montreal, and I picked the quarterback, Kevin Glenn, and Duron Carter, their number one wide receiver, and it went to poop. If it was an emoji, it would be a poop emoji.
By the way, that is not actually a poop emoji, I found out.
Well,
it's ice cream.
Yeah, people say that it's ice cream. I don't know.
That's the hard-hitting question right there. You guys get us on Twitter. Get at us on Twitter. I'm at Crazy Gaby. He's at Buffalo Hold'em, and let us know what you think: poop emoji or ice cream emoji. Anyways, back to you, John.
Okay, well, Duron Carter was one of the guys I centered my lineup around, and he only had 28 yards receiving. Also, I've noticed that the first couple of weeks of the season, he would get carries occasionally, and he really hasn't had that. But he did get a lot of looks in this game. He got, he was targeted quite a bit. But Kevin Glenn overthrew him a bunch of times, and Kevin Glenn had a really bad game. So I was assuming that if Duron Carter had a good game, that Kevin Glenn would have a decent game. I was hoping to get like 20 DraftKings points out of Kevin Glenn. I think he scored under 10. I think it was like 8 and change, which is really horrible for a quarterback. So that pretty much screwed my lineups. On the other side of the ball, Edmonton, had their offensive studs had great days as usual. Darrell Walker, who had like 18 yards the week before, I said he would have a big comeback game, and he did. And also Darius Bowman. They both had big games. Mike Riley had a solid game at quarterback. One of the good calls I did make on my lineup was Kenzel Doe, who's the return guy for Edmonton, and he was only 3,100 last week. And the idea behind that was if you pick up a return guy at 3,100, if he can get 120 return yards, even if he doesn't score a touchdown, that's 6 points. So that's 2 times value, 2 times the price. So he did well. He got, I think, about 130, 140 return yards. So he made over 2 times value. So that was my only good play, smart play from that game. But this game was really kind of a ho-hum game. The second half, the Alouettes just couldn't do anything on offense. While their defense played pretty decent, their offense just was a total abomination. And I think everybody and their brother knew the Eskimos were gonna close that one out.
I don't know. My brother, he's not too bright, so.
He doesn't follow Canadian football.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would not bank on him giving you that information in the future if we're in a similar situation. But
especially not at 1 o'clock in the morning.
I was gonna say this is a little late for you, I'm sure, but I'm just getting started actually. So, Bombers versus the Argonauts, 34-17 here. What do you got for me in this one? Okay, well, as I said last week, if you thought that the Bombers were going to keep scoring points with Matt Nichols at quarterback, well, good things were going to happen, and they just kept rolling. However, I also said, when they had a bunch of wide receiver injuries, and which wide receiver would step up, and the answer is Clarence Denmark, who had 7 catches for 195 yards, 2 TDs. And Clarence Denmark is not a city; it is actually a player in the CFL. He was the big recipient of this passing attack. The Argos have struggled at home this year. They have a new home stadium, and I don't think they've really figured out the energy of the stadium. That's very new age analysis, I know. But Kilgore, who has been the replacement starting quarterback, he struggled against the Bombers D, which I kind of expected. I said it was a very tough matchup for him. They got Gurley and Hazleton were out, and Deontay Spencer came off the 6-game IR, and he had an awesome game, 11 catches for 146 and 1 touchdown. Kenny Shaw had a pedestrian game. He had about 65 to 75 yards, somewhere in that range. He's starting to go up in price, not as good of a bargain as he was before. The guy I like for Toronto, Cody Fajardo, who used to play at the University of Nevada, he got a garbage time series. He's also vultured a couple of short yardage touchdowns at the goal line. But he looked pretty good. I'm impressed with him. He's new to the CFL this year. I think he has potential to be a big player going forward. I had Winnipeg +4 in this game, and that covered easily, and that was my winning wager of the week. Winning wager of the week.
Yes.
That is some alliteration right there, my friend. Are we going to trademark that, or?
No. It sounds so cliche. I could probably come up with something better.
Okay, well, we'll give it time then. We'll let that marinate. Are we ready to move on to the next game here?
Yeah.
Okay. Stampeders. Just want to make sure. Stampeders, Rough Riders, Calgary came in and took care of business, right?
I didn't want to step on your flow there.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. This is what happens when you give and take, right? This is what the Liberals love. You ask for permission. I got consent to move on to the next game. We did everything right.
Yeah, this game was the second half of.
I like how you didn't mention that or touch it with a. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I find too much humor in that myself, but go ahead, please.
Well, I'm glad we can amuse ourselves and our listeners.
Yeah, well, that's up for debate. Go ahead, though.
Okay. Well, this is the second game of a home and home, and Calgary came in and, like you said, took care of business. Although it was a low-scoring game, this game was a bunch of big plays followed by turnovers. The Stampeders would complete a long run or a long pass, and then they would fumble the ball, and then the Riders would do the same. They would sustain a drive, and then they would throw a pick and that kind of thing. A lot of field goal attempts. Jerome Messam for Calgary was one fumble removed from a monster stat line. He had 86 yards receiving. He only had 26 yards rushing, but he had a long pass reception, and he was pretty much clear to the end zone, and he fumbled. It was stripped. He didn't just drop it. It was stripped out of his hands. But if he had scored on that play, that would have given him a really nice stat line for the day. Darian Durant for Saskatchewan had 74 rushing yards, and I've said several times in our podcast that he has appeared to me to be very immobile.
Yeah.
And after watching this game, I wonder if he was hurt earlier in the year and was just playing hurt, and maybe it's up for the individual to make their own decision on this. But if he can continue to put up numbers like that, that can be an eye raiser, so to speak. Makes him an attractive play. Now, Saskatchewan had a backup kicker who hit a 54-yarder, and then he missed 2 field goals, including one with 3 minutes left in the game that would have made it a 3-point game. So missing both of those field goals, which are a lot closer than 54 yards, cost me the cover as I picked the Riders +6. I was really hoping it was going to go to +7, but I decided to take it at +6 because I just felt like they were going to be competitive. And they were. And kicking matters no matter what anybody says. I will always say kicking matters.
Well, let's not kick ourselves too much, at least not the way somebody from this game should be. And let's talk about the touchdown celebration, the Tiger Cats and the Lions.
Now, I did say this was the Saturday night special, and this was the game of the week. This was the one to watch.
And by the way, from look at the score, I'm guessing before you even get into it, it was, in fact, the game to watch.
Yes, it was. And as I said in the beginning of the podcast, I had 2 games that didn't go the way I expected, and this was the second one. I actually predicted I didn't bet the under, but I predicted a lower scoring game here because I thought both of these defenses were above average. And the over-under was, I think, like 55.5 or somewhere up there. But the score was Lions 45, Tiger Cats 38, and that was in regulation. This game was chock full of offense and excitement. Zach Caleros back for the Tiger Cats, and his first possession of the game, he got stripped, fumbled. BC recovered. They did not score on the play, but they were in scoring range. And when BC had the ball, the Lions ran a no-huddle offense for basically all of the first half. And that was something I did not expect.
Huh.
And they kept it going until they had a decent lead. They just dominated the passing game. They led 25-6 and 38-22 with actually 14 minutes left in the game. So you would think that this one was with the ball. You would think this one would have been salted away. But no. Hamilton found a way to come back. They scored 1 touchdown and a 2-point conversion. And then the Lions kicked a field goal with about between 3 and 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, missed the field goal, and Speedy B, our boy, Brandon Banks, 125-yard missed field goal return for a touchdown.
Unbelievable.
And a 2-point conversion to tie the game. I think it was Andy Fantuz. Oh, no, yeah, Andy Fantuz had that conversion. So I also had a little bit of a bad beat on this game. Obviously, with a high score here, all the studs had a good day. I had Jeremiah Johnson, the running back for BC, and he had a touchdown early. He had a decent amount of yardage, but the last touchdown that he scored a second touchdown on the game, and they snapped the ball from the 2-yard line. The ball was fumbled, and Jeremiah Johnson picked it up and ran in for the touchdown. So he picked the ball up at the 2-yard line and ran it in.
Huh.
And this was scored as a fumble recovery in the end zone. So I didn't see it that way. You can go to the CFL.ca website and look at the video highlights of the game, judge for yourself. A lot of people that played CFL on DraftKings were a little upset about this.
I imagine. Wow.
They either they were upset that Jeremiah Johnson didn't get credited for the touchdown, and it says in the rules that offensive fumble recoveries for touchdowns do not count for the player. So
right.
But that was the way it was scored, and that sucks. But it was the way it was scored by the official scorer.
And by the way, just to kind of interject my 2 cents on that for a moment, I am 100% for the policy that you go with the official scoring, because I do not want any DFS site to begin taking it into their own hands. And we've even seen in the past what happens with DraftKings in particular when they will allow, certain sports where the scoring, the live scoring may actually get updated later on after they're supposed to have paid out the contest. They'll hold the payouts until, the live scoring has corrected, or rather the scoring has corrected in favor of some high volume players who it might actually affect positively. Yeah. And then there were some other people that were upset that it didn't count as a special teams touchdown. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of whatever the official scoring is, and you go with whatever the scoring says at the end of the last contest for that slate, and it's locked at that point. Yeah, now this is the first season there's been CFL in daily fantasy, so there's going to be that right bumpy road. I remember back in the day when I used to play NHL. That I actually lost the contest because of a power outage at an arena. They played early into the second period, and the power went out. It was a Devils game. It was in New Jersey. And I didn't get credited for the stats up to that point in the game, and that cost me a fair chunk of change at the time. But that's a bad beat, and that's the way the rules are, and that I try to play by the rules. I don't know, not everybody does. Anyway, back to the game. Go for it.
So it seemed like with Zach Collaros for Hamilton, that his favorite targets were Luke Tasker, which was his top target last year, and Terrence Tolliver. And also I noticed that C.J. Gable, the running back for Hamilton, had a much bigger part in the offense than he's had in weeks past. So he may, depending on his pricing, he may become more of an attractive play. As I said, I expected this game to go under. I was dead wrong about that. I last week I said I liked BC minus 2.5 to win. It went down to -2, but I knew this game was going to be close, and I felt like I was better to cover on the Rough Riders than BC. So I took the Rough Riders at home plus the points, and you get what you get.
Yep.
So those are the 4 games. Split my wagers. Didn't really have a great DFS week as far as my lineup was concerned, but that actually ties into what I want to talk about in our strategy section portion course today.
Super secret strategy section. Does that work? Is that what we can call that, or is there something better you can cook up?
Yeah. So what I want to talk about today in DFS strategy, which you can kind of extrapolate to all the sports, not just CFL, is dealing with losses. And I, as someone who's played daily fantasy sports for 10 years, I know what to expect, and I know that you're going to have weeks where you just get your butt kicked. And this past week, we just reviewed my lineup sucked. While I have not actually officially been able to play for cash money, based upon what I consider to be competitive scoring for each week, I feel that my cash lineups have been competitive for 6 of the 8 weeks so far. Now, 2 of the weeks I felt that I crushed really well. 4 were either small wins or small losses overall, depending on how well I could diversify my opponents. And then the other 2 weeks, week 2 and this past week, I think were big losers where I just was sniffing donkey balls. So,
a pastime of yours, I'm told.
I started a meetup and nobody showed up for some reason.
You'd have some punch to go in with it, and then
we are up way too late. All right. So having played NFL daily fantasy since 2007, I think it's reasonable to expect a strong cash game player. Remember, we're talking about cash games, not tournaments.
Yep.
We'll have 3 to 5 down weeks in a 17-game season. When I started, even way back when I played on Fantasy Sports Live, I played every week. Played a lot of different players. I played the regulars. I played the casual players. And, I would find that, 11, 12 weeks, in a bad season, 10 weeks in a good season, 14 weeks that I would do well, be competitive. So even if I had a down week, I was only, if I, just to be round numbers, hypothetical dollar amounts, if I played $100 worth of contests on a Sunday, if I lost $10 or I won $10, I would consider that I was competitive, but I didn't really make anything or lose anything.
Right.
Now, if I played $100 worth of tournaments and I won all of them or 80% of them or 90% of them, that would be a strong, profitable week. And if I lost 80 or 90% of them, that would be a bad week. So it's absolutely expected you're going to get crushed in NFL at least 3 weeks of the season. Even if you're the best player and you're playing cash games, you're going to have those weeks. Your guy gets injured, the normal variance. And the reason why I bring this up is that's why you have to measure your bankroll and your entries carefully, is to prepare. What if your 3 bad weeks are 3 weeks in a row?
Right.
So you have to sit down and think when you play at the start of the season or now if you're doing CFL, to say, how much bankroll do I have? What size contest should I be playing? How many different opponents can I get? And can I survive 3 really bad weeks in a row? Because now the NFL the NFL has 17 weeks. The CFL has 20-week season. So I would expect that you should have I expect that I'll have 4 to 6 clunkers, bad weeks, especially with the much smaller weekly schedule. There's only 4 games of CFL every week. So there's going to be a little bit higher variance there. So to prepare for that grind, you need to measure your bankroll and your entries in order to survive a prolonged, unexpected losing streak. And there's a good maxim. I don't know who said it. I can't give credit to the person that said it, but it's so true, whether you're talking about DFS or sports betting, is that you will run better than you ever thought you could at some point, and you will run worse than you ever thought you could at some point. And the longer you play, the more you psychologically prepare yourself for a bad run. And you go, you might have a losing streak of 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and you say, oh, it can't be this bad. You start to lose faith in your ability. You go through those periods. I've had higher variance in other sports, but football I've done fairly well in. But you got to have the realistic expectation that 3 or 4 weeks, 3 to 5 weeks at least, you're going to have a significant down week.
Now, do you want to, if I could interject real quick, my thoughts? Do you want to hear the very boring way that I found very early on in my daily fantasy career of dealing with this sort of issue?
Absolutely.
I don't check lineups until the next day, ever. I don't check during the day or during the night while it's happening. I don't check, towards the end of the night. I wait until I am as emotionally disconnected as possible in relation to, playing again the next night to check my lineups, which is the next morning. So I may check the scores of the games to see how everything's doing, but I've played enough now to know also that by just checking the scores, if you look at the scores for all the games, sometimes you will think that by just looking at the scores, your lineups must be crushing it, and you're actually just doing awful. Or you might think that you have no chance of winning this evening, and in fact, you're sweeping every contest because, really slates are so relative to what the majority of the players, who they drafted on their team, relative to who you drafted on your team, that things going poorly for you could just mean that they're going far more poorly for others. And by waiting until the next day to check lineups, I really found the perfect way to insulate myself from any sort of emotional overinvestment or sort of overreaction, and that's what I like.
That's great, but there's some people.
Here it comes. I told you wouldn't like. I knew you wouldn't like it. Most people aren't going to be able to do that.
No. The reason they're playing is for the sweat.
Right.
The reason they're playing is to be able to refresh their phone every 30 seconds.
Fair. That's fair enough.
That's their entertainment value. And I'm trying to help them not lose.
No, absolutely.
But you're right. That gave you a good psychological mind. It helps you focus. It helps you maximize the value of your time. Make it economical, and it's out of your hands. Once the roster's locked, it's out of your hands. So, that's something. But if you're going to watch 3 football games on a Sunday or 2 CFL games on a Saturday, you're going to check a couple of times, I think. Especially if you're in a GPP. In a head-to-head, you kind of know. There's 8 spots on a CFL roster, and if you check the lineups once they lock, you know which players are different from your opponent, and you know who you're kind of rooting for.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
One other thing, since I feel like going on a little rant.
Absolutely.
This has to do. We talked in an earlier podcast about changes you'd make to scoring, and this is a change that I would make. Since DraftKings has no kickers, is that I would put in the defensive selection, the defense special team selection, I would put the kicking into the defense special teams, so that you would get points for if your kicker, place kicker. If I pick, let's just use a CFL example. If I picked Hamilton, if the Hamilton kicker kicked a field goal, I would get plus points for picking the Hamilton special teams defense. If the punter for Hamilton, you give them a small, like a .01 for every punt yard they get, not net, but their actual punt yardage.
Right.
If they get a kick blocked, it might be minus points. But that way you don't have to, there's the element of the defense is still there, but the element of the kicker can really help people make up points. There's got to be some way to tweak that. I'm hoping that I can talk somebody into doing that next year, or maybe incorporating it to NFL at some point. So, if they do kick field goals, give them a freaking point for a touchback kickoff or something, or half a point, or I don't know. Just, engage it so every play is involved in the scoring, So, we'll see. But that's my little personal cross to bear, I guess, until next year comes around.
Yeah, I think you look mighty fine dragging that thing up to Calvary. So,
why don't we move on to the previews for this week's games, and I will tell you what little I know.
Montreal at Ottawa minus 9.5 for Ottawa, 49 point total. So a little bit of a low scoring contest expected here, and looking like Montreal is really expected to not put many points up this week. You think that'll be the case?
Yeah, I wrote here in my notes that will the Als continue to be a shit show?
Yes, I see that right now. Actually, you actually did write that.
So, the coach Jim Pop, who I don't think is a great coach, is also the general manager. So the players, if they were bitching about not getting playing time, they really don't have any recourse. But I wonder, after the really bad showing last week by Kevin Glenn, if they give Rakeem Cato a shot. I think the depth, as we're recording this, the depth charts are out, but I have not looked at them, so I don't know who's starting for Montreal this week. Ottawa's is really healthy right now. So healthy they let Nick Grigsby go back. They released Nick Grigsby, and he goes back to the Kia dealership in Florida after being starting running back for 3 or 4 weeks. Sticking with Ottawa's running game, Keenan LaFrance, I think, is going to be the starting running back, and I've liked him all year. He's been a really powerful runner, and I think if he's priced right, he's going to be a good running back option. Henry Burris is the starting quarterback for Ottawa. He's made some mistakes. He gave a fourth quarter pick six in their last game. They had last week off. They're rivals. This game, I think Ottawa's going to win. I like if you're going to bet on the game, Montreal, I want to get 11 points. I think 11 is the number. I doubt it's going to get there, but otherwise, I might pass on this game. If it went down to like 9, I might even take Ottawa -9. Not really confident on the total. The way Montreal played last week would make you want to go under, but I don't really have an opinion on the total there. On the Montreal side of the ball, there's the only player that I can even think of to recommend is B.J. Cunningham, their tight end. Had about 98 yards last week. I think Deron Carter's going to have a bounce-back game at some point, but this team is such a mess right now. It's hard to be confident in any play on the Montreal side of the ball.
That is a fair assessment. We'll move on to Calgary at BC. A little bit closer at -3 for BC here, and 55.5 point total says this might be the game of the week, maybe from an entertainment standpoint.
Well, it's definitely for first place in the West, so it's a Friday night late game. So I'll probably be in my smoking jacket, not my jammies.
What is a smoking jacket? I'm a youngster, so humor me here.
A smoking jacket is usually like a velvet or suede monogrammed jacket.
All right.
That basically social clubs would give out.
All right, you lost me.
Way back in the day, like the 50s. Like Hugh Hefner used to wear a smoking jacket all the time at the mansion before he went to the full-on bathrobe. When he actually had the Playboy Club in Chicago in the 60s, before he was in the Playboy Mansion, he used to have a TV show called Playboy After Dark, and it was like jazz musicians and Lenny Bruce and comedians and stuff. He would always wear a smoking jacket in those TV shows, those old Kinescope. Anyway, enough about me being old. It seems that everybody's on the Lions bandwagon. After the last 3 games, they scored all these points, like 38, 40-something, 45 points. They've been a fantasy juggernaut. Jonathan Jennings has come through, not when I wanted him to, but he has. However, I think I like Calgary in this spot. These two teams played in week 1 at BC, and Calgary played really flat game. BC came back and won that game in the fourth quarter, but Calgary's been playing really well, and I think they have a real shot at this game. If this spread went to 3.5, I think I would take Calgary here. I think BC is due to have a lower scoring game at some point, which makes me want to play the under again. But if they keep running this no-huddle offense, it's hard for me to play the under at 55.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. Is that
maybe at 58. So it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen here. You got 2 of the best coaches in the league, so I think they're going to prepare for each other. Both Jeremiah Johnson and Jerome Messam are the top running backs in this game, and I like them both, but I like Johnson better. He'll be better priced. I noticed last week that the returner for Calgary, Finch is his name, he really impressed me. He had a few long returns, and I'm not really sure what his price is, but if he's also priced around that low 3,000 range, he'll easily make value. So if you're looking for a low-priced filler for your team, I would take the Calgary returner Finch. And again, my tendency, my instinct says to go for the under here, but until I see somebody stop this BC team, it's really hard to bet that under unless the total goes way up at some point. So you never know.
Now the real litmus test is, would Shania Twain be impressed?
Not much.
Okay, not much. There we go. Apparently he has the moves, but possibly not the touch. So could be a little bit of an issue there.
Sounds like somebody's been to karaoke earlier.
I actually have interesting that you mentioned that. I have a road trip mix that I listen to on Spotify when I'm out driving around with friends or I happen to be on a road trip. And there's some very strict rules that one must adhere to when adding songs to the road trip mix. Has to be at least 10 years old, so 2006 or older, and it has to be no older than 1990 as the release date. So you've got this 1990 to 2006 kind of 16-year amalgamation, and the final criteria for being on the road trip mix is there has to be a reasonable expectation that everybody listening, regardless of who they are, how old they are, will likely know how to sing the chorus.
Okay.
So obviously that was one of the songs that made it onto the road trip mix.
Well, I think. Yeah, I was just gonna say I was probably going to rock Lisa Stansfield, but I think she was late '80s. I don't think.
I don't know if that would make the cut, but if you, John, or if anyone else has any suggestions on songs that should be added to the road trip mix, please get at us on Twitter. I'd love to hear some new suggestions. I've been actually going through some old gangster rap and putting in some Tupac, some Biggie. Some of that jazz in there, and it's been pretty nice. So,
all right. So let's
Buffalo, Buffalo, Buffalo. Can't you see? Sometimes your picks just hypnotize me. All right. Anyways, Edmonton at Toronto, +3 for Toronto in this one, 53-point total. Another good matchup for the Eskimos here, right?
Yes, I like Edmonton to Toronto has been very inconsistent this year, and they have not played well at home. And I just said their home vibe is off. They play in a soccer stadium.
Ugh.
And they play in it's called BMO Field.
Damn globalists.
And it's the home of Toronto FC. But the Argos quarterback issues, this is another instance where the depth chart is going to come out tomorrow morning, or this morning since we're after midnight. But Cody Fajardo, I'm very high on him, and if he plays, I think that's a game changer. He'll be very cheap if he starts, so he would be a sneaky value play at quarterback. But if Kilgore goes again, I kind of like Edmonton here. Toronto has lots and lots of talented receivers, even with the injuries they've had. So even if Gurley and Hazelton are out, you've still got Spencer and Shaw, and then you got Brandon Whitaker in the backfield. So there's guys that can get yardage if you need to find somebody to fill out your lineup. On the Edmonton side of the ball, it's really hard to get away from the top. Mike Riley at quarterback, the number 1 and number 2 stud wide receivers, Walker and Darius Bowman. And then again, I like Kenzel Doe again. He'll be the return guy. He'll do all the kick returns, all the punt returns. Again, on his price, he'll make value so you can concentrate on the other positions. Most of the Toronto home games have been pretty low scoring. I like the under here if it gets to 55. 53 is kind of a tough number. 55 is a good number. I mean, based on the typical scoring in a CFL game. Once it gets 55 and over, I like to look to play an under. So we'll see. But if the spread shrinks, to 2 or 2.5, Edmonton -2, -2.5, I would probably take Edmonton. But it depends on the Toronto personnel before I would even think about taking the Toronto side here.
Very good, sir. And that brings us to the final game of the day, Saskatchewan at Hamilton, -10 here, so even larger than the Montreal-Ottawa game. 53-point total, though. And my least favorite name in the entire CFL, the Tiger Cats. They're playing great offensive football, so you're thinking this is going to be another drudging from them?
Well, I'm saying they're playing great offensive football because they scored 38 points and they gave up 45 points.
Oh, right. Okay, there we go. I had it confused a little bit. My bad there.
Yeah. But they've had a couple of tough losses. They've lost twice. They lost both times to British Columbia this year. But I think Saskatchewan is just what the doctor ordered because I think that the coach for Saskatchewan is committed to playing Darian Durant, and their only win has been with the backup Mitchell Gale at quarterback, who's much younger and I think has a little chip on his shoulder, something to prove. At 1-6, they're already playing out the string, really, at this point in the season. Montreal and Saskatchewan are out of the playoffs. We already said they were the two big question marks this year. So the other 7 teams in the league are fighting for 6 spots. There's only going to be one other team that's going to be out of the mix. And who's that going to be? Right now it might be Toronto, depending on the injury situation. But Hamilton needs a win, and this is just what the doctor ordered. All of their players are very attractive in this matchup. Quarterback Caleros, you got Tasker, Fantuz, Tolliver, Brandon Banks, all the wide receivers there. CJ Gable, the running back. Those are all the players I target for Hamilton. I like the Tiger Cats defense. You always get that bonus for a return touchdown. That's really hard to pass up. But the fact that Saskatchewan has really struggled, I think that means that teams have found something against the Saskatchewan offense that they haven't been able to overcome. So this game could be a lot closer than 10 points, but it could also be a huge blowout. I might need plus 14 to even think about taking Saskatchewan. They're like Montreal. They're just a mess, and you just can't have any high expectations out of anybody on their team. Nobody's performed consistently. I think even the worst teams in the league get 3 to 4 wins in a season. So Saskatchewan's going to surprise somebody at some point. It's one of those things where they start to play so bad that you kind of have to bet on them to win at some point, because the parity is just too great in this league for a team to go 1-17. So
I feel like that last 60 seconds or so, you were speaking to me about my podcasting career. So it was very, very personal, though it wasn't actually on your end. It wasn't intended that way, but I just want to let you know I really connected. It resonated with me, what you just said.
I think that the total, depending on which way it goes, I think I would lean towards the over here, especially if it dropped a point or two. But Hamilton is a very attractive play this week. All of the Hamilton offense, the Hamilton defense, definitely in play. I didn't get a chance to look at the pricing. I'm going to release the lineup tomorrow. But Ottawa and Hamilton are obviously must plays on defense, or must consider on defense, because of the mess that those other offenses are in. So we'll see. I hope to do better than last week's clunker, but I want to keep running up some winning wagers and keep my percentages up on the season. It's nice to be in playing with house money, as they say. So as always, you can check out my rosters that I give out for free, and any betting wagers that I give out for free on my Twitter page, which is @BuffaloHold'em. And you can tell them about where to find this fine podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's where I come in. Yeah, this fine podcast. You can find it at fearthebeardmedia.com. You can follow Fear the Beard Media on Twitter at FearBeardMedia, or you can just follow John at Buffalo Hold'em on Twitter, and he, like he said, releases lineups, releases plays for CFL, Lots of interesting tweets, retweets that come down his timeline, as well as some tweets telling you when this podcast is incubated, hatched, and ready for your consumption. So go ahead and hit him up at Buffalo Hold'em.
Very well. Any last final thoughts before we reach the proverbial halfway point of the season?
Yeah, I just hope that somebody will begin to bet on me because, hey, you can't lose every one of them, and going to have to win at some point. So I like that. That's going to be like my new. It's going to be a calling card when any job interviews in the future. Mr. Harbour, why is it exactly that you think you'd be a good fit here at this company? Well, listen, I haven't won in a long time. Someone's going to have to put the bet on me because I'm going to win at some point. Why not you? There you go.
I believe in you, damn it.
I appreciate that, and we will end it on that note. Thank you, folks, for listening. We will be back next week. Take care.
See you next time.
Howdy, folks. Gabriel Crazy Gaby Harbour here, founder of Fear the Beard Media. Are you a fantasy sports fan? If so, I've got an amazing offer for you. Rosters.com allows players to draft a new team every day, which is basically the most enjoyable aspect of traditional fantasy sports. This is called daily fantasy sports, and you may have heard about two of the leading companies, FanDuel.com and DraftKings.com. I can't personally vouch for them the way I can for the team at Rosters.com, though. The entire staff cares deeply about each player's experience, which is why I trust them to take care of you. And get this, here's an offer you won't find anywhere else. If you sign up and deposit $20 right now at Rosters.com using promo code CRAZY, you'll receive an additional $20. For those of you counting at home, that's a total of $40 you can use to enter contests right away when you deposit just $20. Again, to cash in on this offer, simply sign up now and deposit $20 using promo code CRAZY at Rosters.com, and their team will credit you an additional $20. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, or through any other major podcast directory. Head over to fearthebeardmedia.com and check out all the podcasts on the Fear the Beard Media Podcast Network. If you're interested in starting a podcast or joining the Fear the Beard Media Podcast Network with your current podcast, email us at fearthebeardmedia@gmail.com. We'd love to get you on our network, absolutely free, no cost to you. Follow us on Twitter and Snapchat at FearBeardMedia and on Instagram at FearTheBeardMedia. Until next episode, take care.